Hello and welcome to ERUPT, the home for how businesses can scale and transform. Throughout this podcast, we aim to inspire and educate to help you and your business thrive. Across the course of our episodes, we'll be interviewing industry leaders to uncover some of the challenges across the world of work. We aim to give an insight into some of the fastest growing organisations across HR and technology. Please follow us on our journey to ERUPT and elevate your business. This episode is from our ERUPT Learning and Talent Conference, which was hosted in September 2022. The conference focused on topics from developing emotional intelligence to creating a transparent future career. This final episode will conclude the series by discussing the topic of burnout. Our amazing panel included Nerissa Caesar, who is Reward and Wellbeing Specialist at Westminster City Council, and Steph Newton, who is the co-founder and CCO of Ambr. The panel were asked what burnout feels like to them and whether it's a personal experience. Our panel also talked about how organisations have a duty of care to support their employees and structurally create work environments that reduce amounts of stress. I hope you enjoy, and make sure you check out the Go ERUPT website for further content and for all videos on demand.
Hi, good morning, everybody. This is really strange, not seeing people. My name's Nerissa Caesar. I'm the Wellbeing and Reward Specialist at Westminster City Council. I started with the council in May 2019, so been there a bit over 3 years now. My route into working in wellbeing was far from direct. I graduated with a law degree, and then at some point after that decided I wanted to forge a career for myself in HR. And then after getting some exposure to wellbeing through a benefits coordinator role, I managed to land this standalone role. So that's myself. I look after all things employee wellbeing and benefits related at the council, and I also do some less sort of exciting reporting and things to do with the pay and reward side of things as well. But about 75-80% of my role is employee wellbeing.
Fantastic. Thank you, Nerissa. Over to you, Steph.
Hi, everyone. I'm Steph. I'm the co-founder of Ambr, which is a B2B tool that we are building to help organisations prevent workplace burnout by thinking about what the root causes are. So my background, I've worked at a number of corporates and startups and scale-ups. Most recently, a couple of years ago, I was at Uber, where I had my own personal experience that I set up Ambr with. So this webinar is close to my heart as well, and something that as of this year, I've decided I want to also kind of pursue and figure out how we can help other organisations really solve the problem as well.
Fantastic. Thank you, Steph. Thank you both for the introductions. Let's get right into the questions. I'm sure this is one people have been looking forward to. I certainly have been looking forward to it for sure. So we'll continue with you, Steph. What does burnout look or feel like to you? And is burnout the same as quiet quitting?
Yeah, really interesting question. I mean, I think burnout is actually really personal. I think if you kind of look up burnout on the internet and you know the research on it, there are certain dimensions that are applied to everyone that has suffered with burnout in the past, which are things like feeling exhausted, feeling cynical about your work. But I think from my own personal experience and also from speaking to people who have gone through burnout, actually the symptoms that you might see in yourself could be very different to someone else as well. So I think for me personally, I really related to what's described, which is around feeling cynical and negative about my job. I've always been someone that's been very driven and engaged. And I kind of realized actually with hindsight that I had a period of time where I just felt less engaged and not really wanting to respond to things or be as prompt at completing things as I used to. And it was only once I'd left that job environment that I realized that I'd kind of gone through burnout in the past. But I think really, yeah, as I said, individual to individual, it can be quite different. Quiet quitting has obviously been exploded in the last couple of months as a trend on the internet, which I think has been really interesting to see because I'm sure everyone knows it's really something that's been around forever, but it's just a new buzzword has been applied to it. I think for me, I mean, quiet quitting, as I define it, is really just deciding to step back from your job and apply more boundaries and not go above and beyond. For me, it's very different to burnout. I think there is some sort of link, but, you know, burnout is a syndrome of excessive stress. Quiet quitting is a proactive choice that some people might choose to make to step back from their job. I think you could say that I'm sure some people that proactively decide to quiet quit might do so because of stresses in the workplace and the feeling that they might burn out over time. But as I mentioned before, I think burnout can often happen to the most engaged people, and they might not actually realize until after it happens. So I don't necessarily think that quiet quitting is a solution to burnout, nor really that a lot of people that go through burnout might never think about quiet quitting as an option. And I certainly don't think that it is an effective option either. I think there's should be doing to prevent burnout from happening. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. And Nerissa, do you have anything to add to that? I think it's quite powerful questions. I think
Yes.
yeah.
Steph was quite thorough in her response, and I was like nodding along there like the Churchill dog, because everything she said was absolutely spot on. How burnout presents itself in everyone is different, it's personal, but there is, the WHO, their definition, and it includes cynicism towards work, feeling less efficacy, feelings of less efficacy when you're less efficiency when you're carrying out your role, and also pure exhaustion as well, which is I would say the most general sort of symptom, or the way it presents itself, of burnout. It does present differently in different people. I personally almost burnt out towards the end of 2020 because I didn't want to use my annual leave because I wasn't going to be able to travel because of the pandemic, when actually you do need to take breaks from work. But when I say almost, I didn't, because I'm very aware of my stress signature and how these things present themselves within myself. So I sort of put in place risk mitigation tactics to prevent that. But it does look very different to different people. That much is true. In terms of quiet quitting, it has exploded in the media and in the HR world over the past few months. I think that's the new buzzword or buzz phrase for working to rule, because you, as Steph said, you're actively making a proactive decision to just do what is on paper your job role, just description, and nothing more. Some people might do that as a very drastic solution to try and prevent themselves from burning out, or to try and pull something back or regain control. But I don't think it's the same thing, and I don't think it's a sort of tactic or a way of deploying a sort of way of coping with burnout at all. I think it's an active decision, the same as what Steph said, and burnout is something completely different. Often burnout happens and people aren't aware of it until it's too late, or somebody else points it out to them.
Certainly, and I think that's certainly a key point, right? In terms of actually the individual knowing that they are suffering from signs of burnout. Essentially, I think that would be the difficult part to distinguish, and I guess conversations like this will certainly make that easier for an individual to recognise that actually I am burnt out at this point. But sticking with you, Nerissa, how can we make wellbeing personalised, and is it a pick and mix approach to psychology?
Hit me with a tough question. I hope everyone can hear me okay, because it's saying that my internet connection is unstable for some reason. How can we make it personalized? Because it's something which is very personal to people, the only way to make it personalized, it lays within the individual. So organizations, employers, workplaces have a duty of care to make sure that workspaces are safe, cultures are inclusive, all of that. I think as far as as employers' responsibility, or as much as control as they have goes, it's to create a culture, an open culture, where people can feel empowered to take time out, or steps to safeguard or protect their well-being. But in order to make it personal, it's offer as much as they can within reason, and then for people to tap into that. So I think it's a sort of double-edged sword. The organization has a part to play, but then individuals have their part to play as well. I think that's the only real way to make it personal, because how people look after their well-being, or things that are effective to look after their well-being, looks very different to different people. So I know that mindfulness is good for mental well-being. I work in this sphere. I cannot for the life of me get a grasp on the mindfulness thing, and when I'm trying to sit there and clear my mind, I'm almost becoming frustrated at myself that I can't do it. That's no good for my well-being. If I can check out, get a walk in an open space, that works for me. So because not everything works for everyone, the best way to make it personal is to offer I think a good variety, and people can tap into what works for or is interesting to them.
Really good point. What are your thoughts on that, Steph?
Yeah, first of all, completely agree with what Nerissa said at the beginning, which was around organisations really having that duty of care to employees on this topic. And I think I agree. The way I kind of think about it is that when you think about well-being and everyone's well-being journey, on the one hand, you've got kind of the symptoms which can kind of destabilize someone and make someone not feel comfortable at work. And I agree that when you're managing the symptoms of stress, then having a personalized approach is really important, and being able to offer a broad spectrum of options to employees is important, because I completely agree, Nerissa, everyone manages it in a totally different way. For me, it's exercise. I also can't really get behind meditation personally. I know some people love it. But then I think the other angle that's really important that organizations need to do more on is to think not just about how do we help employees manage the symptoms of stress, but how do we also stop those symptoms of stress occurring, and what are the cultural reasons within the workplace environment and the workplace factors that are actually leading to people having to tap into those wellbeing solutions available. And I think that organizations need to do a lot more to not just think about providing perks and benefits later down the line, but also to think about structurally how do we create environments and workplaces that reduce the amount of stress that people feel as well. So I think it's thinking about both ends of the journey as well.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. And sticking with that subject, then, what can organisations do to allow you to effectively kind of manage workload and prevent those stresses from occurring, Steph?
Yeah, I think so. It's interesting, first of all, I guess, that you talked about it with respect to managing workload. I think that that's one big component that is really important and is often the thing that people think of first of all if they've gone through something stressful. Workload's usually involved. I think it's providing the right resources and tools to employees to help managing their workload. I think the more challenging part, which I think a lot of organisations don't get right, is thinking about how to, again, set up the right culture where, first of all, it's okay for employees to kind of raise flags when they can't manage their workload. And there's a safe space created where if you say, I've got too much work at the moment, the response is not going to be that you can't cope. So I think really creating that vulnerability is very important, and organizations should think about how to do that. And second of all, leaders have a responsibility to make sure that people aren't expected to be on the whole time. So I've spoken to so many organizations where someone very senior will be sending emails over the weekend and will not realize the impact that that has on people in their team. And they might say, you know, oh, but they don't have to reply. But actually thinking top down about your behaviors and how that can help then others manage their workload is really important. So I think it's providing the right resources, quite easy to do, harder creating that safe space and vulnerability.
That's a fantastic point around the emails over the weekend. Whilst there will be some, I guess, that will receive these emails and just think, okay, I'll deal with that on Monday. There may be others who that does actually really affect, right? Seeing emails come across from their leadership teams or line managers or whatever it may be. So that's a fantastic point, Steph. Nerissa, have you got something you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, only a small something, because again, Steph completely hit the nail on the head there. The impact of what you do, how that can negatively impact on others, even though it might not be intended at all. So this is something that always on culture, which quite quickly took hold at the beginning of the pandemic when everybody was at, all, sort of back office based staff, those who could carry out their roles from home, were working from home because we weren't, allowed to go anywhere. It was, I've saved 2 hours or 2.5 hours or 3 hours on my commute. I can now use that time to work, or I'm at home and my laptop's just there in the corner and I can go and log on. One thing our chief exec does do is walk the talk. And he realized quite early on that if he's sending out an email as the chief exec, even though there was an expectation from him for people to reply, how that might be perceived. Oh, he's the boss of everything and he's emailed, I've got to get on my laptop and respond to this. So he's made a more conscious effort to not email people on the weekends or outside of working hours. And that's something that he's done as a leader, which is great, because it's leaders should lead by example. That's why they're leaders. He also tries his best not to have meetings before 10 a.m. in the morning. So Steph was completely right. It's the organization and what they can do, and not all stress or anxiety or work-related stress comes from workloads, even though that is a big contributing factor. It can be other environmental factors within the workplace as well. Is there an open culture within the team? Can you speak to colleagues or your people leaders, line managers, about how you're feeling without being seen as ineffective in your role? The organisation has a big role to play in that. Without just having the perks, you do need the perks and the employee benefits. It's a given. It's part of the employee experience, but it's about that culture as well. And not only it's okay not to be okay, which one of our mental health first aiders said, it's a great sort of strap line to have, but it's more about it's okay to talk about not being okay, because not being okay feels pretty horrid. So it's okay to talk about that, but we want to do all we can to help people feel better.
Yeah, okay. And apologies, staying on the piece you just mentioned there around benefits and perks, and I think this is a fantastic question. Do benefits and perks help or just cover up burnout?
Depends. A fair point was made. I went to one of these free conferences earlier on this year, and I was putting the question to this round table. There's about 15 of us. We've just launched our new health and wellbeing strategy for staff, which I wrote. We launched it in April, and as off the back of that, on top of everything else we do, we have quite a comprehensive offer. We rolled out a wellbeing week of events, and each day had a theme. And the engagement to that, the take up and attendance was quite low. And I was asking if other people in other areas are seeing this problem. And a chap who works for the NHS said, that's all great and it's good to have these things, but take for instance the environment I work in. I work with emergency responders. People are pulling back to back 12 24-hour shifts. If we say there's on-site massages happening in the staff room, nobody's going to engage with that because they're overworked, they're stressed, they're tired, or they probably welcome a nap more than anything else. So it's, are you getting everything else right before you put these, before you introduce these perks or benefits? Do people feel like they can tap into it? Because at the moment, well, when I first started at the council, it was about building on the offer that we had. We now have a really great offer. I'm proud to speak about it, and a lot of the councils are like, yeah, your offer is great as well. But at the moment, we're not seeing a huge take up, and that's because people feel like they have so much work on that they can't take an hour out to attend a webinar or a 30-minute information session on our new benefits platform. So it's all well and good having the perks and benefits in place, but if people don't feel as though, one, they can use them because they're not applicable to their personal situation, their lifestyle or what have you, or they don't have time to engage with it, then it's going to fall flat. So it's about having the offer, but also making sure that the environment and culture is set up and people feel like they have time and can actually engage with the offer.
No, that's a fantastic answer. And Steph, do you have something to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, again, completely agree with lots of what Nerissa just said. I think definitely the low adoption rates with a lot of employee wellbeing and perks is a big problem. In general, I think, of course, there's a role sometimes for wellbeing and perks, but it's also just a band-aid to the burnout problem. And again, it's just not addressing the root causes, which I talked about a little bit earlier. But I think really an organization that is serious about solving burnout needs to address those root causes, and perhaps that still means having a perk and benefit structure for other reasons. But if you want to address burnout, think about those root causes. There's an interesting piece of research which some people are probably familiar with, and they identified kind of 6 root causes as being critical factors leading to burnout, and one of them is workload. It's the lack of control, lack of reward recognition, unfairness, breakdown of relationships, and values mismatch. And we think a lot about those 6 and what organizations can be doing to address each of them. I think also really what organizations should be thinking about is how can they build in solutions that are part of someone's everyday. So going back to, if you're super busy with your job and then you don't really have time to take an hour out to do something which should be kind of helping your work life, it's how do you have tools that fit into your email systems or your communication and remind people on how to, have behaviors that don't lead to burnout, as opposed to just having a well-being solution that requires, separate logging in, spending an hour to do, which people don't have time to do.
Yeah. No, fantastic insight from both of you there. I'm going to go off track to one of the questions in the chat because I think it is super relevant to what the two of you have just been discussing. And I'll read it out. I'm sure you can see it anyway, but and I'll leave the floor open to whoever wants to answer it. But Andrew Gordon says, I've heard it said that that's because rewards narrow our focus and can be perceived as carrot and stick and puts people under stress. Have you experienced this?
I think coming from the perspective of the person who's planning this and literally only wants to help people, that I wouldn't have seen it from this perspective, but I get why people do see it from this perspective. There are people who have worked at the organisation a lot longer than me. And as I said, it's very personal. So it's not unfair to say that some people might view it in this way. And I think Steph kind of already at least sort of almost answered this question with what she said at the end there. We need to get to a point where this is seen as the norm, where it's regular. It's not just when we have World Mental Health Day, which is coming up, or Mental Health Awareness Week, which happens in May. It's not just seasonal. It's the expectation is there for people to, feel like they can take the time out all the time. That culture is created within teams, within departments, directorates. I think until we move to a space where it is the norm, it is fair to say that people might perceive it as such.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I think ultimately organizations just have to think very holistically about what their strategy is for preventing burnout and having wellbeing solutions. And depending on what you're trying to solve, the solutions that you apply might be quite different. So it's fine to have wellbeing and perks, but you need to think about why you have them and what you're trying to solve there. And it can't be just something that's in place so that then you can respond when someone says, oh, I'm stressed and burnt out. And then you say, oh, but we've got free headspace or something, because that's not going to be a suitable solution for lots of people. So it's just making sure leaders and organizations are thinking holistically about what different tools and solutions they need to have in place to solve specific problems.
Perfect. Andrew, hopefully that answers your question. The next question is a question that's being asked essentially everywhere. I see a poll on LinkedIn, I think every day, at least 4 times a day regarding this question. But is the 4-day week the magic wand, or does this just increase stress levels? Steph, I'll direct that at you.
Yeah. It was actually interesting. I'm not sure if people saw, but there was some news out this morning with some more results from that trial, which I think were quite positive. I think my view on the 4-day week, a couple of things to say. I think, first of all, it's very difficult to judge the productivity benefits of a 4-day versus 5-day week over a short time horizon, even if that's like 1 or 2 years, because ultimately, I think what will end up happening if people did put in place a 4-day week would be that Thursday would then just become the new Friday at some point. So maybe there are short-term gains, but long-term, I do think it will probably affect output. That's my personal view. I think also, I think in line with what I've just been saying for my other answers, I don't think that a 4-day week is really addressing any root cause of burnout in any way. So say you've got a work environment that can be quite toxic, poor relationships, as I mentioned, with other colleagues, poor communication from leadership. If you just put in place a 4-day week, you aren't solving for any of those root causes. So you can imagine a lot of environments that a 4-day week, yes, maybe there'll be a positive response to that initially from employees, but it's not going to be solving any of the root causes that lead to stress, even with respect to workload as well, right? You have 4 days, you might have had an unproductive Friday, maybe then you try and become more productive in 4 days, but if you're not at the cause really trying to think about workload and how you define roles and responsibilities, I don't personally see how a 4-day week can really solve for that. So I think, again, it might work for some organizations, but they really need to be thinking about it in addition to thinking about the other root causes, and thinking about it holistically rather than just thinking, let's have a 4-day week and that will solve everything, because I don't think it will.
Nerissa, what do you think?
I absolutely agree with what Steph was saying on 2 points. The reality of the situation, having colleagues who work part-time, which I know is different because if it was 4 days and it was adopted widely, it would be everywhere. And the other one is related to work types. So in terms of, I've got colleagues who work part-time and I actually see them working and logging on, responding to Teams messages and emails on non-working days, even though their out of office specifies which days they work. And just seeing it through that lens, like, you're not supposed to be working, but you're still trying to cram a 36-hour week into your 3.5-day week or your 3-day week, which is why I within myself, I don't believe that it is the way to solve the issue. You need to get to the root causes of why, you know, the work is causing stress, or why the environment is causing stress, or burnout, or all of those things. The other thing is the different work types. So I work for a council. We're a public sector organisation. We have so many different job roles within the council. I'm still 3 years later getting my head around all of them. You know, we've got city inspectors who work a 24/7 shift pattern. We've got social workers who are on call. Those are just a couple. We've got some people based in NHS workspaces as well. So I don't think it would be fair for us as an organisation, even though this is not something which has been discussed, to look into something like that if we weren't able to apply equitably. If we said, okay, back office staff, you're okay, you can have a 4-day week, but everyone else just continue as you are, because, you know, our ultimate sort of role in society is to deliver services to residents, and those need to keep being delivered at the standard that they currently are. I don't think we'd be able to roll it out to those staff. So that's a reason why we as an organisation are not looking at exploring that. But I echo what Steph said. If you're not looking at the other things that could potentially cause burnout, deploying a 4-day working week won't solve anything.
Okay. And playing devil's advocate, I imagine it could have a slightly more adverse effect than leaders probably take into account, just in terms of, like you say, I think you both touched upon it, just people trying to cram 5 days worth of work into that 4 days anyway. And I don't know if you guys have had conversations with leaders or businesses who have adopted a 4-day working week. Have you seen any kind of like evidence of that, or have you had any experience of that, where people are just cramming the 5 days into the 4 days and actually ending up a lot worse in the long run?
I haven't seen any real life evidence of it. I have been in discussions with organisations about whether to trial the 4-day week. I think, I guess, yeah, as Nerissa and I have both said, it's really, it can never just be used as a one-off solution without thinking holistically about the org. I think that's what's key. One thing I think has worked well in some organisations, if you're thinking specifically about like the levers of productivity, is like adjusting how many days people work throughout the year. So I know organisations that have successfully done a half-day Friday in the summer months, for example, and then go back to a 5-day week in winter. And I think switching things up throughout the year can sometimes be an effective way to not reduce productivity. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, just reiterating again, I think it just has to be looked at holistically alongside what other solutions leaders are thinking about putting in place to improve the working environment. It's never just going to be a throw in the 4-day week and then we'll miraculously have tick the boxes on all these other things.
Agreed. Okay, perfect. How can organisations create safe spaces for their employees, both at home and virtually? Stick with you, Steph.
Big question again. I think first of all, just, I know you specifically said virtual and at home, and I think it's just worth calling that out. I think one of the biggest difficulties in the move from a Monday to Friday office environment to hybrid or home environment is that challenge of not really having the same visibility on your workforce anymore, not being able to look across at the person who sits opposite you every day and see how they're feeling and just get a pulse check or have a chat with them at the coffee machine. So I think it really does need to be top of mind for leaders to think about how to create that culture in the home and hybrid environment. I think for me, I think that, and there's pros and cons to this, I'm a believer that sometimes you need to create more artificial spaces within the hybrid environment that can then encourage vulnerability. So whether, I think during COVID, you know, a lot of people probably did things like virtual coffee hours. But I think thinking about how can you structurally in your day with your team create artificial spaces for people to feel safe is really important. And again, from an organizational perspective, how can you think about pulling in third-party companies and tools where necessary to help build that vulnerability and create those trusted spaces again. So just always being aware of where you can pull in experts, I think is really important as well. And ultimately, I think leaders and managers clearly play a critical role in this, in determining what the behaviours are for their team. So thinking about providing specifically your managers and leaders with the right resources and tools to create those safe spaces with their team members is always going to be really important as well.
Nerissa?
Again, everything Steph said, she answered it perfectly. I think one of the things that organisations can do is set the expectation that they expect it of people leaders to be checking in with their team members, because I ultimately think that until looking out for well-being or prioritising well-being is a target or KPI or a recognised form of success within performance management measures, that it won't be taken seriously. So I think organisations need to say, look, we expect that if you have a team, you have people reporting into you or teams reporting into you, that you will do check-ins. It could be as simple as doing a temperature check every time you have a one-to-one or an appraisal, just something so it's part of the norm. Because I think if they just do it once every so often, people won't open up or feel like it's safe to speak up, because they were like, you've never asked me how I am before, like this is strange, like what are you after? Are you trying to find out that I'm burnt out and therefore trying to push me out of my role? People will be a bit skeptical about that. So I think that's one of the ways that it can be done. And also helping managers that might not find it, might not necessarily be comfortable with doing that, because we know that some managers avoid asking how their team members are, even if they can see signs of stress, anxiety, burnout. They can clearly see it in front of them, but they're like, I don't know how to do all that touchy-feely stuff, so I'm therefore not going to ask the question. Prepare them with the tools, give them, conversation toolkits, things like that. And if it's a case of, I don't know how to help you, this isn't my forte, but if you tell me what you need, then if I can't do it, I can certainly speak with one of the other people in the organisation. We've got champions, we've got mental health first aiders, we've got HR. I can go to them and we can all work together to sort of give you what you need. So I think it's about putting the expectation that managers will ask and look out for their team members' well-being, and also making it part of the norm and helping them out with the tools. And I wouldn't necessarily say training. I don't think they need a half day or full day training outside of mental health awareness training, that is, because I think that is really important. But yeah, give them some sort of toolkit to make them have that conversation.
I think it's actually really interesting that you mentioned the temperature check pulse, because one of the things we've actually been building as part of Ambr is thinking about how to build like a daily temperature check into things like Slack and Teams and whatever communication tool you use, and really thinking about how you make things a daily habit. So the three of my direct team, the three of us have been on a daily basis doing a mini temperature check that takes literally 30 seconds. And the first couple of days, maybe it's a bit more effort, and then you so quickly get into it being a habit. And on the days if someone doesn't do it, it really feels like a hole, and it's become part of a ritual for us, and a really nice way to replace that in-person chat that you used to get when you came into the office every morning. So yeah, I completely +1 on what you said there about really thinking about creating better habits for teams as well.
Fantastic. Well, thank you. We are just conscious of time, but honestly, that's been an unbelievable session. Some really great insights. So thank you both for taking the time out to discuss the topic with us. But before we go, and it may be a repeat of something you've said previously, of course, but can we just have some key takeaways? And we'll start with you, Nerissa. If you can just give us a quick summary or a key takeaway that the viewers or listeners can go away with.
I'd say the focus should be on sort of working relationships, because if those are that go very badly wrong, they can negatively impact on people's overall well-being, not just burnout. A focus should be, as an organization, or if you are as some sort of people leader or you have that sort of influence in an organization, about having more open conversations, because I think the vast majority of issues that arise could be solved if people felt like they could have a more open conversation, wave the white flag if something is going wrong. Those would be my major takeaways. Concentrate on the culture and having more open conversations.
Perfect. Thank you, Nerissa. Over to you, Steph.
Yeah, I agree again. I think one of the things that's been rewarding about this chat is realizing that Nerissa and I are very aligned on lots of topics, and it's always very reassuring to speak to people who have the same views on this. But I think, it's not about perks and benefits would be one of my big ones. They can play a role, but if we're thinking about really preventing burnout within an organization, it's thinking about what are the root causes and the environmental factors within a workplace that lead to that. And leaders, whether that's HR leaders or business leaders, need to be thinking about how to create better environments for their teams and how to form daily habits, use tools to form new daily habits that incentivize behaviors that reduce burnout risk, not increase it. So that would probably be my summary.
Perfect.
This podcast was brought to you by ERUPT to Annapurna, the #1 platform that case studies the organisations that not only disrupt, but those that erupt. Please visit our new Go ERUPT website for more content and log in to watch the full episodes from the conference. Thank you for listening to today's episode. Make sure to watch out for the next.